Hey Wrangler 4xe fans, I want to welcome you to this very special video. It's very special mainly because it's taken a lot of time to put it together. So like and share. I'm not one to normally ask for that, but like and share this video because there's a lot of work that went into this one. This video contains information about blended hybrid mode versus regular hybrid mode. If you're not familiar with that, I'm going to get to that here in a minute. Just keep watching. I'll explain the whole experiment. But it took me several days to do this, to gather all this data. And this video is so cool, too, because I had a little help in the process. This video is sponsored by Recurrent. If you aren't familiar with Recurrent, go to recurrentauto.com and check out what they're doing. In the electrified vehicle industry, whether it's a plug-in hybrid or an electric vehicle, one of the big concerns for a lot of used owners, people who are buying used vehicles, is what is the health of that vehicle? Odometer readings that we've used traditionally on internal combustion engines are usually an indicator of health and where the vehicle is. And there's even values established. If you go on, any of the websites that sell cars, you can pretty well guess what the value they're going to put on that car based on the miles and the options. Well, that's a little different when it comes to electrified platforms. And Recurrent is filling that gap that exists by trying to provide owners with data that is drawn from real-world experience, real-world data on plug-in hybrids and electric vehicles, so that when somebody's buying a used vehicle, they can tell kind of what the health of that battery is based on the data that they're drawing from other vehicles. I just would encourage you to go check out recurrentauto.com and see the awesome work they're doing. And thank you to Recurrent for sponsoring this video. If you've been around the forums or the 4xe fans Facebook group, you may have heard people discuss the term blended hybrid mode or M8 mode. And if you aren't familiar with that, I think I've got another video that I recently uploaded about that very thing. And you pull the shifter over to the left once you put it in drive, and then you can shift manually. Now what that does is it forces the gas engine to run in a kind of a blended hybrid mode, where it uses both the battery and the gas engine together for the entirety of the discharge of the battery, if you will. So if you do that, you make the battery last longer, of course. And we have found, a lot of us that have experimented with it have found that we can go 60 or 70 miles before the battery reaches the less than 1% state. And during that time, a lot of us find that we get 30, 33 miles a gallon. And now, that's a weird number, of course, because we're also using electrical energy in that. And that creates the question for me from a net energy perspective, which way bears out better? And here's the two cases. Imagine using all your electric energy first, getting to the less than 1%, and then going into hybrid mode. Or the second is to just run in blended hybrid mode for the entire length of that battery, and which one comes out to be more energy beneficial, if you will. I don't know how to state that. I don't know if I'm stating that in the right way and everything, but that's the experiment I've got since I'm crossing the great state of Ohio and most of the state of Pennsylvania today. And I'm going to be on the highway. I'm going to try to standardize my driving as much as possible. I'm going to set the cruise control at 65 miles an hour. And for the first leg of this, I'm doing the blended hybrid mode. You might hear the engine in the background. And I'm going to see if I can find a place to get off right around the 70 or 80 mile mark, where I can get off the highway, fill the gas to check my gas mileage, to get an accurate measure of my actual gas mileage, and not using the dashboard as my gauge for that, because I have found that the little calculator on the dashboard can be off 2 or 3 miles a gallon in either direction. So we're going to give this a shot and see if I can find that place where I can pull over, maybe go for a run, and plug in and charge, go for a run, maybe get some lunch, and then I will try the experiment in the other direction, where I just allow the vehicle to burn up all the electrical energy first, get to that less than 1%, then continue in hybrid mode and get off the highway again and see what my gas mileage is at the pump at that point, and see how that compares. It's 61 degrees when I'm leaving the house. I'm not going to be able to control that variable, but I'm going to control as many of the other variables as I can, and keep this to a consistent experiment. So thanks for being along on this video. I think it might get a little bit lengthy, as I'm going to try to include as many details as I can as I go, and we'll see how this pans out at the end of the video. Just to give a sense along the way of how things are going so far, we've gone 16 miles, and we still have 18 miles and 82% on the battery. The dashboard thinks we're getting 32.5 miles a gallon. We'll see how that plays out when we go and do our fill up at the pump. We'll calculate our actual gas mileage. But there we go at 16 miles. We're at 18%, or 18 miles and 81%. Okay, here we are at the 35 mile mark. We were at 50% charge, 11 miles of range. Of course, 11 miles is inconsequential in this experiment, but at about the 35 mile mark, we were about 50%, which would suggest that we should be able to get about 70 miles. I'm going to have to, I think the charger I'm going to stop at, not sure of the distance. I think it's going to go a little bit beyond that 70 miles, but whatever that distance is, I'll try to match that as closely as possible in the second leg of the experiment. So just a point of interest, and of course this is expected, you won't see this shared load, this load sharing, I guess you'd call it, between the electric motor and the gas engine in other modes and in hybrid mode. But since we're blending these two, we're forcing the vehicle to blend these two, there's a consistent output from the electric motor and the gas engine that's kind of stays right there where it is, or somewhere in that neighborhood for most of this trip. I'm in Ohio. I'm traveling east from Dayton towards Columbus, and it's relatively flat. There are some slight inclines and declines where these numbers will change, but we're on a flat stretch right now, and you can see those numbers stay pretty consistent, and we end up with a pretty consistent draw on the battery. We're at 51 miles, and we're at 21% and 5 miles of range, which of course doesn't matter for this experiment, but there's just kind of some points of interest along the way. All right, here we are at the end of our first leg of this experiment. I did the M8 mode all the way. Oh, I already reset everything. There's my trip A odometer that I reset at the beginning of this experiment. It was, well, I've gone a little bit farther. Let's look at the actual data. So I did 66.7 miles. 9/10 of that was in electric mode just from happenstance, and 65.8 was hybrid. When I was getting off the highway, I had 1/10 of a mile just from where I left my driveway this morning. And when I was getting off the highway, I was at the less than 1% point. And so I just allowed the thing to, it was in hybrid mode the whole time. I just shifted it over to regular drive mode, and I wasn't trying to shift when I got off the highway. So I did end up with a 9/10 of a mile of electric miles. So all told, 66.7 miles, and I went to the first gas station I could get to and pumped 2.321 gallons. And I had filled up before I started this, so I was at full. And you know, the dash said I got 35.6 miles to the gallon. However, if you do the math on that, that's 28.7 miles to the gallon. And so yeah, that's a little bit lower than other experiments I've done with blended hybrid mode. Just to give you an idea of what I'm running here, I am in a stock Sahara, mostly stock, other than some lights, and I'm running the factory Sahara wheels, and I actually am running 38 pounds. That's purely by accident. I'm not trying to hypermile or anything, but everything is at 38 pounds this morning. I don't know if that's just due to the temperatures. So that's what I'm running. I don't have a whole lot in the back. I just have a bag, and my charger is back there, and I do have a backpack over there, some books. So not running very heavy, but that's what the Jeep setup is for this experiment. And so let's just keep going. I'm gonna have to go find another charger. The one I came to, there's a Pacifica hybrid plugged in, very cool. And so I'm gonna go find another one nearby. After I charge, I will go fill up again and then maybe go back and top off my charge just to make sure the whole experiment is done exactly right. So bear with me as I go through that this morning. All right, here we are. We're gonna charge up. Found this Green Spot charging station in Columbus, Ohio. So that's where we're charging. Side note, spotted my first Hummer EV in the wild down here. So there's the Hummer EV, and it's charging at a DC fast charging station, as you can hear. So that's a CCS connection, which the regular 4xe does not support, of course. And the other handle there is probably a Chademo or Chadmo, however you pronounce that other charging platform. But anyway, here's the Hummer EV. Pretty cool, good looking truck. So, I don't know if you may not be able to see these headlights as well as they show up in real life. They're strobing on the camera because of the shutter speed, but they look really cool. Quick little mid-video correction here. I was trying to figure out how I had only managed 28.7 miles to the gallon. It seemed a little low compared to earlier experiments that I've done when I've played around with the blended hybrid mode. And I went back and looked at the map, and the distance between my house and my first place I stopped for gas is actually about 68 miles. Now, I know it's not a big difference, but that actually comes out to be 29 miles a gallon. But I figured that was worth mentioning here. I might have inadvertently reset my trip odometer when I was down the street from my house, because I was messing around with it, and I'm thinking that might be a correction that I need to make there. So actual distance 68 miles, actual miles a gallon 29 miles a gallon. Not that that's a huge difference. All right, here we are. We're gonna get ready to go. Now I am gonna reset my A-trip odometer so I count the miles well. I am going to stop at a gas station to top off the wee little bit of gas that I used to get here, just to make this this entire process legit. All right, just for the sake of science and making sure my data stays pure, I wanted to share what I did here. Since I couldn't find a gas station really close to the charging station where I was at, I went ahead and put the vehicle in electric mode just to spin off electric miles and no gas at all. And came to a gas station. I have put in 9.5 miles, that's mostly highway. And I just topped off the gas just to make the this experiment pure, just so I have a full tank. So when I stop at the end of this, I don't know, 66 miles, 68 miles, I can fill up and we can get a real accurate sense of the miles per gallon difference or similarities between the earlier experiment. So at this point, I am going to put the vehicle in hybrid mode and just allow it to make its decisions on how this works instead of using the blended hybrid mode. We're gonna let the Jeep do its thing. All right, here we are about almost 18 miles into this leg of the experiment. We've got 2 miles of range left, 7%, and we'll pick this back up when we cross over to the less than 1%. All right, we just hit the less than 1%. We managed to get 20 miles out of that charge, which I'd say is pretty impressive given that that was mostly highway at 65 miles an hour. So I'd say 20 miles is pretty darn decent. So now we're going to spin off the rest of the distance in hybrid mode. As you can see, it said 52.9 mpg was its estimate, which we know that's not a real great figure since it was all electric. But I'll see that go down. That number will go down as we get closer to our 66 to 68 miles. And I'll get off the highway at that point at the around that 66 to 68 miles to match our earlier experiment. And we'll see how this plays out. I'll top off the gas and we'll have an accurate measurement of how much gas we will use for this remaining 40 some miles. and see how this plays out from a net energy perspective. Just a point of interest along the way, earlier in the video when we were doing the blended mode, we noted that the battery was contributing alongside the gas engine quite a bit. You know, the gas engine's always giving a little bit more as far as kilowatts go, and how they rate, you know, how they rate energy. Of course, gas engines don't produce kilowatts. We measure that in horsepower, but we've done a conversion inside this thing to where we can kind of compare apples to apples. And if you aren't, you know, familiar with energy conversion, that's an interesting subject. You can Google that and see how you convert horsepower to joules to kilowatts, you know, whatever. But that's just a big branch of a tree we don't need to climb out on. So what you can see here, though, we're charging the battery right now to the tune of negative, well, there it went to zero, -1 kilowatt. And one thing you may observe that's a little bit interesting, you can see that my positive, my charge gauge over here is in the positive. And you may find yourself in that situation where you're going, well, wait a minute, how can I be in the negative over here and the positive over here? And I'm on a flat enough road and at a low enough speed that I think this is like the prime place to demonstrate the huge advantage of having those two electric motor generators on the Wrangler 4xe. There's one out underneath the hood, as you well know, and there's one in the transmission. Right now, propulsion is coming from the P2 motor. You know, and here we're providing a little bit of propulsion, and but we're still getting a little bit of a charge from that P1 motor generator out underneath the hood. So you could have a negative number over here, a net negative, I should say, between the two, and still show a positive over here. And if that's ever confused you, that's what's going on. Is since the gas engine is running, we are able to always get a charge from the P1 motor generator, and we're always able to get propulsion from the P2 motor generator, and that's how you can end up with those kind of what almost seems like conflicting results there. But as we compare to that video from earlier in the video, where our numbers were both positive and both kind of holding positive, and the battery side, of course, was presenting a lot more power. Now you can see that it's mainly the gas engine that is providing propulsion along with that P2 motor generator, but we're always able to get a little charge out of that little guy out on the front of the engine. So really interesting to kind of overanalyze what the systems are all doing right now. All right, so we are at almost the 30-mile mark in this part of the experiment, and so we're not quite halfway there to stopping and filling up and seeing how much gas we've used, but we're getting there. So thanks for tagging along on this video. Okay, here we are in the trip. We're at the 60-mile mark. I just looked at the map. I've got a gas station about 6.3 miles ahead of me, so I think that's where I'm going to stop, which should get us really close to that 66-mile point that I'm wanting to hit to make these two experiments even-steven on distance. Temperature's a little higher at this point of the day. I don't know how that figures in. I'm not smart enough to figure that out. As far as the variables go, that's one. I have had the air conditioner on the whole time. I've had it set at 68 the whole time. So as the temperature gets higher, I would think that it's working a little bit harder, but I've kept the fan down low and I've kept it at 68. I have had max regen turned on the whole time, although I don't feel that is going to be problematic. I would have turned that off on the first leg, but I didn't catch it until about 20 miles in, and I figured at that point it was already skewing the numbers, so I might as well skew both numbers with that. I really don't feel like it's going to be problematic in either way, since it only kicks in when you're decelerating. I'm on the highway, so I'm not decelerating, and I've had the adaptive cruise control on the whole time. So if you aren't familiar with the adaptive cruise control, it will use that same regenerative energy from the P2 motor. It'll reverse the phases on the three-phase motor to slow you down, just like max regen, only it's more adjustable, more variable. So I'm gonna stop up here and we'll fill up and we'll have our measurement for this leg of the experiment. All right, here we are, fill up time. And I tell you, if I'd have planned this, I couldn't have worked this out any better. 66.5 miles to this gas station from our original point. The dash is saying I got 30.4 miles to gallon. So pretty close to its estimate from the other experiment. Let's see what it does when we actually fill up here. Ouch. So here are our results. This is, compared to what we did this morning with the M8 mode or the blended hybrid mode, we ended up with either 28.7 or 29 miles to the gallon, but allowing the vehicle to make its decisions. Now, granted, I was forcing it into electric for the first like 9 miles. However, I think the Jeep would have just done electric anyway, because it went ahead and did electric for the rest of the time after I stopped at the gas station to top off. But I wanted to keep our numbers accurate. The dash said 30.4 miles a gallon. Our actual miles a gallon is 29.4 miles a gallon. So kind of confirms for me what I've been thinking, is that energy is energy. It doesn't matter how you use it. From a net energy perspective, I haven't really proven to myself that that one method is better over the other. We came really close to the same results within a mile to the gallon, and of course there could be other variables involved. There were some I don't know, temperature differences, any number of variables. So just wanted to share those results. And I'd like to thank you for taking part in this little experiment. Now, I'm going to finish this video with doing one more little thing. People are always asking, what does the Wrangler 4xe, what's the gas mileage that it gets? So I'm going to add that into this video. I'm going to go run on the highway. I'm going to reset my A trip odometer. And I always reset my B trip odometer when I fill up, but now they're just going to be exactly the same. I'm going to go drive for a little while. I'm in eastern Ohio, and I'm heading towards Pennsylvania, and we're going to see what the gas mileage is without any charge. So we're going to go out, we're just going to go driving, and this will be just a little bonus content at the end of this video. All right, here we are at the end of my extended range test, on top of doing a MPG test without any battery charge. You'll see I managed to get 338.8 miles out of this tank of gas. It was a full tank of gas with no charge, and I just decided to go ahead and see how far I could push it. You can see there's 14.6 miles of electric range on there. That's just the happenstance opportunity that it gets when it's going downhill and different things, that I managed to get over 14 miles with the engine shut off. And we're gonna see what the actual miles per gallon is when we fill up here. The computer is estimating 24.5. Let's see what it does. Ouch. Cha-ching. Oh, wow. All right, so on that fill up, to get 339 miles of range, and it got down to 1/8 of a tank, but I still had some range left. Could have gone a little farther. The dashboard said that I got 24.5 miles to the gallon, but the actual, when you do the math there at the pump, it's 22.7 miles a gallon. Not bad. But I'm going to see what that does now going the other way. This is, if you haven't noticed, I'm changing shirts throughout this video. This is actually day 3 of me shooting this video. I'm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I think they pronounce it Lancaster, Pennsylvania. and I'm going to be heading west towards Ohio and going clear over to the other side of Ohio to the Dayton, Ohio area. And I'm going to do another mile a gallon test just to be fair about, I was going east on one, let's go west on the other, see if wind makes a difference. And in past videos where I've done experiments like this, I was getting around 24 miles a gallon. Now, one thing that has changed on my 4xe is I have taken off the stock side steps that come with the Sahara, and I just have the rock rails like you'll find on a Rubicon. And I have heard from a very reliable source, who I won't name, that there is actually a difference, that those side steps actually make the Sahara just a little bit more efficient. That's because of the aerodynamics and the buffeting up underneath and all that stuff. But for some reason, those side steps might actually help. And so 22.7 mile a gallon might actually be what I end up in that range. So we're going to see. We're going to see on this test. And just stay tuned, and we'll get back on some results here when I go to fill up the next time. All right, I figured I'd spare you my travel montage and just get right to the data. That's because it's almost midnight, and I'm getting a little heavy-eyed, if you know what I mean. So that trip, I ended up 336 total miles. Maybe could have squeezed a little bit more out of it, but I reached the 1/8 of a tank low fuel light, and I also reached the on the range estimator, it reached that point to where it said it was just low, so it's below 30 miles, and I just wasn't in the mood to push it this late in the evening and this far away from home. So I ended up with 22.5 miles the gallon over the course of that 336 miles. Now, there was a stretch there where I was in a downpour, and it was pretty ugly. But here's what I'm questioning. I'm questioning if taking off the running boards, like I said earlier, I've heard from a good source that those running boards actually help with efficiency. And I think it's about 1.5 miles to the gallon is what I'm losing, because I could regularly get 24 miles a gallon before I swapped out to the rock rails here. Got about 16.5 miles of electric miles where the engine just shut off on the highway, going down hills and stuff. 319.5 hybrid miles, 336 total miles. The dash said I got 23.8 miles a gallon, but by calculating the miles per gallon off of how many gallons I pumped there, it was really coming out to 22.5. So that's the end of our road test mileage, the gallon test thing. I don't know. I'm worn out. It's almost midnight. I'm just trying to get back home for the evening, and that's about all we got for it. If you do these kind of experiments, I'd like to hear about it in the comments down below, what you end up with, and if you have a Sahara or a Rubicon or a high altitude, which is a dressed up fancy Sahara, of course. But I'd like to hear about what your experiments result in, what your experience is there. And really, thank you for watching. Thanks for sticking with this video. Take care.